I'll just pray as we start. Father God, thank you for your presence with us wherever we are. I thank you that you're already here. I pray that you would speak to us this evening through the words of, that people have written thousands of years ago, and these words of the songs that are much newer. And I pray that each person would be encouraged in their walk with you, that would be challenged, and that we would be able to fix our eyes on you at this time. Amen.
Amen. What are we going to say? So for these songs, obviously we're not just here to make noise, we're here to encourage you guys to worship as well. So it'll be here, please feel free to join in, and let's lift up God together, because that's what we're here to do.
Every knee will bow before the Lion.
God, we just ask that you'll be moving by your Spirit. You'll be helping us all, moving us all to engage with you, to renew us. You'll be speaking to us. You'll be giving to us words, reminding us who we are and who you are, how great you are. God, we speak out to you and we ask, God, that the praises that we offer, you be glorified. Yes, God.
Our hearts,
We lift our hands, we turn our eyes to you again, and we surrender to the truth that all we need is found in you. Receive our adoration, Jesus, Lamb of God. Receive our adoration, how wonderful you are. We choose to leave it all behind and turn our eyes towards the prize, the upward call of God in Christ. Lord, have our hearts, Lord, take our lives. Receive our adoration, Jesus, Lamb of God. Receive our adoration, how wonderful you are. Every soul who sings out, everything you've made praise out, all creation standing now, lifting up your name, joining in the angels' song, gathered to your ancient throne, children in our Father's love, shouting out your praise. Receive our adoration, Jesus, Lamb of God. Receive our adoration, how wonderful you are. Receive our adoration, Jesus, Lamb of God. Receive our adoration, how wonderful you are. All I need is you, Lord, is you, Lord. All I need is you. All I need is you, Lord, is you, Lord. All I need is you. All I need is you, Lord, is you, Lord. All I need is you.
we come with expectation today.
Faith can move the mountains, let the mountains move. We come with expectation, we're waiting here for you. We're waiting here for you. You're the God of all creation, still you know my heart, the author of salvation. You loved me from the start. We're waiting here for you. With our hands lifted high in praise, and it's you we adore, singing is true, and we're desperate for your presence. All we need is you. We're waiting here for you. With our hands lifted high in praise, and it's you we adore. Singing hallelujah, singing hallelujah, singing hallelujah, singing waiting here for you. With our hands lifted high in praise, and it's you we adore, singing singing hallelujah, singing waiting here for you. God will continue to make that. You're already speaking to us.
this is our chance to listen, to refuel. Thank you for all the goodness that you've poured out. Thank you that we've still got food to eat and a safe place to live. Thank you that we can connect with each other like this. We ask for more. We ask for healing for those people who are suffering at the moment. We ask for wisdom for how to use the resources we have during this time. We ask for your Spirit to lead us.
Cool.
I'm going to take a seat
Right,
over here.
you're going to go over there and you're going to hand things over to me, I guess. Right, so isn't it great? Firstly, that we get to come before God, we get to come and worship Him, we get to offer Him such great words. So these: receive our adoration, Jesus, Lamb of God. Yeah, isn't it great that we come before God, we get to offer Him these things, and we get to do it so freely and so openly and so willingly, and we get to continually come to Him. That it's not difficult to come to God, and that His offer is open to everyone. Yeah, thank you, God, that your offer is there, and that we can, even though we can't meet in person at the moment, we can still meet via the internet and other technologies. So, what are we up to? 15 people now, so that's exciting. Right, so Justin asked me to continue in our series of Hebrews. Hebrews, if you don't know, is one of the letters of the New Testament, so one of the letters that was written after Jesus' ministry on earth. And it's written to a bunch of Hebrews who and reminding them just how great some of the things that Jesus did were, and going back into the Old Testament and looking at all the things that had gone before and comparing them and showing how much greater a performance Jesus did compared to everyone else who had gone before. And just asked me to pick up from in chapter 11, which is, for anyone who knows their Bibles would recognise that Hebrews 11 is one of these great, really encouraging passages, reminding us about all the people who've gone before us and everyone else who's looked to God before. But there's one word that comes up in Hebrews 11 again and again, and that word is faith. And so before I read it, I'm actually going to give you a little Greek lesson. If Demetrios is listening to this, I'm sure he's going to correct me afterwards, but so two words that come up, and actually Hebrews 11 is sort of been picked up, is part, although we often can just read it as one chapter on its own, it's part of the whole story, part of the whole letter of Hebrews, where you come through this message that keeps going, reminding us of what God has promised, and how great it is of all the things that God offers. And Hebrews 11, you get to this list of people who've gone before and how they listened to what God had promised and what's still to come. And then there's another couple of chapters afterwards, which I'm guessing we're going to get to in the coming weeks. There's another couple of chapters to go, but I think so. Hebrews 11 it comes through to this great crescendo of reminding us of all these people have gone before, all these people have trusted God before, and what God has what they've gone through, and then what God has promised them. So I wanted to start, as I've mentioned, I wanted to start looking at just this word faith. So the word faith, as we so often get in Hebrews 11, is the word pistis, which is really comes from another Greek word, which is pytho. See, I had some good use in the internet earlier. I'm sure Eleanor can remember some of these words from school. No, she can't. Right, so
You're on your own.
I'm on my own. Right, so pytho is really, people getting this funny idea with faith of thinking about, well, there's some things that we know. There are some things that we know in life, and that we're sure of, and we have science and reason and things like that tell us, look, this is the fact. These are the facts, and therefore we can determine what's been going on. But then they get to these other words, and this word faith, and people tend to associate that with some religious things, and they're like, oh, faith is a strange idea. Is it just believing things that we're not sure about, but just believing them anyway? But actually, the Bible never talks about faith in that sort of sense. Faith, this Greek word pythos, is something you've been persuaded of. It follows through an argument, and it's saying, look, we're convinced, we've seen all the evidence laid out before us, and we're convinced by what has happened, and that is true. And so faith, pistis, is really just someone who's been persuaded of something, so something you are convinced of as being true. And so there's some things like, now, in a lot of this, in terms of having faith in God, it depends on how much we've seen of what God's done before and how much we know about God. And it's looking through all the evidence of what God has done before, and convincing ourselves that what he's done before still applies to us now, and that he's faithful, and that's another Greek word, being faithful, pistos, obviously very similar, but someone who is faithful, someone who is being persuaded and has shown themselves to be convincing and to be able to follow through with what they have promised. And so when the Bible talks about God being faithful, it very much means that God has looked up before and has demonstrated through the evidence that we have about God that he is faithful, that he keeps his promises. Now in chapter 11 of Hebrews, we very much get this continued exhortation to reminding us all to continue on in faith. And so if I start by working through from Hebrews chapter 11, talking about everyone who's had faith, who's been persuaded by what God has done in the past, and reason that it makes sense to trust God because he's going to continue being faithful into the future. So if I start reading, I'm reading from the English Standard Version of the Bible. Actually, we could post a link. Would that do? Would that work? You can post a link on there.
Maybe sometime.
Okay, we might get a link to Hebrews 11 from the ESV, but if I start reading, I can start talking. So, now faith, being persuaded, is the assurance of things hoped for and the convictions of things not seen. For by it the people of old received their commendation. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. By faith Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gifts. And through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. By faith Enoch was taken so that he should not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him. Now because he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. And without faith it is impossible to please God. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists, and that he rewards those who seek him. By faith Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he amended the world and became an heir of righteousness that comes by faith. By faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance, and he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs still with him to the same promise, for he was looking forward to that city which has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. By faith Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who has promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born descendants as many of the stars of heaven, and as many of the innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who spoke thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of that land for which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and who had received the promises was in the act of offering his only son, of whom it was said, "Through Isaac shall your offspring be named." He considered that God was even able to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. By faith, Isaac invoked future blessings on Jacob and Esau. By faith, Jacob, when dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, bowing in worship over the head of the staff. By faith, Joseph, at the end of his life, made mention of the exodus of the Israelites and gave directions concerning his bones. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents, because they saw that the child was beautiful, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith he left Egypt, not afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. By faith they crossed the Red Sea, as on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. And what more shall I say? For time would fail to tell me of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, and of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, heard about this morning, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release, so that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in half, they were killed with the sword. They were about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains, and in dens and the caves of the earth. And all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, though apart from us, that they should be made perfect. You've had a great long list there of other people who've gone before us through the Old Testament and have been really faithful to God and keeping faith in, who were persuaded by God by what he's done in the past and were able to believed him. And this goes right back to verse 1, that faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the convictions of things not seen. They're persuaded by, in this case, yes, it's being persuaded by God about the things that they hope for, and being convicted of the things not seen. So it's not just if they're being persuaded by God, they're also convinced that they have to act accordingly, that they have to change something about themselves, about their behaviour. And in this case, it's very much in trusting God that he's able to do what he says. And so, I mean, that's verse 1 on its own talks specifically about what faith is: being assured of things that you hope for, because they've been promised, and being convicted about things that you can't see. So very much about the things that have happened. So in this sense, I have faith that you are all watching this on Facebook. Now, a lot of that is because I know how Facebook works, and that I have evidence that I am broadcasting on Facebook, and I have faith that the way that Facebook works, that you're watching it. However, faith in Facebook on its own is not going to get me very far. It'll allow me to continue to broadcast to you, which is great, but I think faith in God is talking about quite a lot more than that. And so actually we'll keep going through a little bit further into verse 6. In verse 6 of this we get that without faith it's impossible to please God, for whoever would draw near to God, so if you want to draw near to God, you have to have faith. You must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. Now again, past evidence of what God has done. The stories that come in here that have been written out by everyone who's gone before us and has known many things about God and believe that his promises, that he keeps his promises, have seen God and have trusted him, would draw those who have faith draw near to God, believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. Now, I'm not just asking you to believe such things blindly, believe that God exists and that he rewards those who seek him, but we ask you to believe based on the evidence of the people who have gone before, and finally on Jesus, and what he did for us, and what he did very publicly for us, and that the words he spoke were true. But remember this, we have a lot more evidence, and I'm going to come to that in a bit, about all who Jesus was and what he promised. But actually it's all these people, this great cloud of witnesses before us, through the rest of Hebrews 11, and what they saw in God. So from the start we had Abel, who, what did he do to show? Well, there's a question through all these people that for all of them, they did something in faith. They stepped up in faith. They showed not just that they believed God, but they did something to demonstrate that belief in God as well. And for a lot of them, you see that through that, God actually commended them for their faith and did things in their lives as well that very much helped their situations. And so we know through God that he doesn't just, although he asked us to have faith in him, to believe in him, you often find that he does other things as well. We have heard, and just in the last few weeks, we've heard, and we've been praying for many people, and we know that God answers prayers, and God has been moving people around, and healings, and of course, asylum cases granted, things like that we know that God is able to answer, and that we've been praying for. And so we've got demonstration just in the last few weeks of great things that God has been doing, not just when we ask him things, that he is able to answer those. But going through our list here, so we've got, from the start, we've got Abel, we've got Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and Moses. And for all of them, well, they offer God various different things. So starting from Abel, you see that Abel, so working through, we've got Abel from verse 3. He offers God sacrifice, and we see that sacrifice is accepted by God. Keeping going, Enoch in verse 5, he says that, what did Enoch do? Well, he pleased God through. You don't get very much about Enoch. If you don't know about Enoch, he's only given one line back in Genesis, that he was taken up straight into heaven. He didn't die. That he he pleased God through whatever it was that he did, and we can be assured that that was having faith in God through this. We don't know much else about what he did, but he pleased God and he had faith in God. And for that, God took him straight up, that he didn't die immediately. Keeping going, Noah. So these other Old Testament heroes that we've sung about, and we've got many songs about. And so Noah, it says Noah in faith. Noah built an ark, not really knowing and not really knowing what was going to happen, but God told him to build an ark, and Noah believed God and he acted accordingly. He built his ark and he became an heir of righteousness, it says, through that. And then we get on to Abraham the great father, who knew very little about God other than what these people before had seen of God. Abraham, where are we? In verse 8. Abraham obeyed God, he was obedient, and he travelled to a future city, to a new land, a land that wasn't his own, but he travelled anyway. And Abraham was, through that, inherited a promise from God that that land was going to be for his future people. Abraham's wife, Sarah. If you don't know Abraham's wife, she was God had promised them that their salvation of their people would come through their own lineage, and yet they didn't have children, and yet God considered Sarah. Sarah said, so we have from Sarah that she considered God to be faithful, and through her act of faith in considering God is faithful, she gave him the power to conceive and the ability to bear children even at a great age. Abraham, it says, we offered Isaac in faith. He went out believing God, and he offered his son Isaac, and he figuratively received him back from the dead in his reward. Isaac was able to continue on blessing his children, blessing Jacob and Esau. He went out in faith. Jacob blessed his descendants as well, in faith, without knowing, and yet God, although Jacob just said the words, so he gave specific blessings to all his children, and through that God used that and made a lot of those blessings come true, and about the future generations that those children would have, because he was following God and his promises in what he was blessing them. And then we get to Moses. Moses chose mistreatment. He chose to be different. He chose to not accept that he was not take up the family that he grew up with, but follow God's people, because he knew what was going to happen, and realised that God was faithful, and that what God had promised him was going to come true. And his reward was mostly that he was able to leave Egypt. But then Moses continues on in faith. And he receives, in faith he goes through the beginning of Passover, and while the Egyptians don't act in faith and find that their firstborn are destroyed through that, but the Israelites believe God, they have faith in God, and they coat their door posts in blood, and through their faith the firstborn are not destroyed. And then in faith he goes forth and crosses the Red Sea, and yet the Egyptians don't have faith, do the same thing, doesn't go well for them. So what are we saying about faith? We're asking you all to believe in God because he's demonstrated himself to be faithful, and that through Jesus he's shown us that he is faithful. One of these promises that keeps on getting repeated is that this promise that God makes goes forward through generations, that the promise made to Abraham, Isaac believes, and it goes forward a generation, and Jacob believes it, and it continues forward in a generation, and then Joseph repeats it as well right at the end of his life, that he goes forward a generation. And then Moses actually goes forward and sees God's promise that the people will inherit their land and will escape from Egypt, and goes forward and it happens, and he sees God's faithfulness through all of that. But through all of that, we hear that people are not able, there's this land that's been promised that people don't yet live in. And yet these people all believe God, that this land is still to come, that they're not there yet. Part of that is very much the same for us, that all those people live in faith about the land that there's going to be in the future, and yet they all died before it even happened. Now for us, this very much applies for us as well, because a lot of us are thinking, well, actually, I'd rather be sat in Bridge Street, listening to you rather than sat at home. We'd really like to meet as people, and of course we'll be able to do that on Zoom a bit later. But there's this promise that goes through it all of this future land still to come, and yet the people still believe God, even though they hadn't seen the full fulfillment of it. They'd seen bits of it. They'd seen that God was faithful, was able to do some of what he'd done, and yet this promise that the people would inherit their land hadn't happened yet. And yet, in Hebrews, it actually talks about what we've been looking at in recent weeks in Hebrews is talking about that actually there's another land yet to come, that we're not there yet, that although a lot of what God has done in the past has been fulfilled, that there's still one great fulfillment still to come, that there's a future land that we're all going to live in. It talks about us now, these are other bits of the New Testament talk about us as not in that land yet, and it very much feels like we're in exile at the moment, being sort of not quite at home, where we are not able to even go out to church, or not able to go out to work, or not able to go out to school anymore, I suppose. That we're all stuck at home. Things feel quite different at the moment. There's this, so things don't feel as they should. There's still something still to come. There's something in us that just feels that this isn't quite right, and that we're waiting for a future land still to come. And yet we're not. Yet the Bible talks about saying, "Oh, hang on." Although we'd like just to go back to normality of feeling that we can all be united as things were, the reality is that even in that situation, there's still something more yet to come. And so a lot of this talks about that. The future land still to come, and calls us as, and there's other bits of the New Testament talk about us as exiles. So, talking about so Hebrews. I'm skipping ahead a bit to Hebrews 13 here, but talks about us as saying that we don't yet have the lasting city. So this is Hebrews 13, chapter 14, but we don't yet have a lasting city. We're here to seek a city that is still to come. And there's other bits of New Testament. So there's 1 Peter 2 talks about. So 2 chapter 11 says, look, it talks about us as being sojourners and exiles at the moment, and says, look, there's still something still to come. Now, all these people before have not yet seen, and yet they have not yet seen the land that's yet to come. And so what we get at the end of Hebrews 11, all of these who commended through their faith did not receive what was promised. There's still something better to come. Since God has provided something better for us, that apart from us, they should not be yet made perfect. He ends it just by saying, look, there's still a better land to come. Follow their example. Have faith. That's the way to get into the kingdom, to receive God's promise. Have faith. God has demonstrated that he is trustworthy. He's demonstrated it. He's saved so many people in the past. He rescued the Israelites out of Egypt. And yet, there's still a better rescue yet to come that Jesus has demonstrated to us on the cross. Have faith in God. And yet we will see that rescue is still to come. And I ask that you all are able to do that and have faith in God. And we'll hear about quite how great, all the great things still to come through that next time in Hebrews. Excellent.
Thank you, Matt. As we are talking about time in exile, and our bodies, which will be a new creation at some point. I was looking at the 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7, where it's like we walk by faith and not by sight. But in the message it talks a lot about our new, well, we're stuck in our current bodies and we have to wait. There will eventually be our resurrection body, but we've got a glimpse of that. The Spirit of God whets our appetite by giving us a taste of what's ahead. But at the moment, we have to make do with being in these circumstances when we really want to be home with God or even able to worship together. But He sustains us through this time, and that faith is a gift from Him too. Our last song is a celebration of the courage that He can give us. So we'll sing that together. I think I put the lyrics for this one on as well. And then we will wrap up and head to Zoom. So I hope no one except Dimitrios is getting too impatient that we're not on Zoom yet. But yeah, one last song to finish.
Yay! Give us your courage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Backing down, I will stand my ground, lifting high the name of Jesus, pouring out your light to a world in need, giving out the love of Jesus. And though the battles rage, your blessings still will come. To the ends of the earth we will go, to the ends of the earth we will go. Give us your courage, give us your power. For the truth of your word we will stand, for the truth of your word we will stand. Give us your courage, give us your courage. Be our strength and song till the battle's won. Cause your face to shine upon us. Stretch your hand to say, our God never fails. Nothing is impossible for you. Though the battles rage, your blessings still will come. To the ends of the earth we will go, to the ends of the earth we will go. Fill us with power, fill us with power. For the truth of your word we will stand, for the truth of your word we will stand. Give us your courage, give us your courage. Would you breathe on us? 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 To the ends of the earth we will go, to the ends of the earth we will go. Fill us with power, fill us with power. For the truth of your word we will stand, for the truth of your word we will stand. Give us your courage, give us your courage. To the ends of the earth we will go, to the ends of the earth we will go. Give us with power, give us your power. For the truth of your word we will stand, for the truth of your word we will stand. Give us your courage, give us your courage. Yes, God, give us your courage. Help us to be filled with faith, with full assurance who you are and what you've done, the great great redemption for us, and Jesus on the cross was for us. And that you're demonstrated through your resurrection from the dead, that the offering you desired has been accepted, and that we can be adopted as your children, and that we are known by you, that we are loved by you. We can come to you, and even though life may not always be easy, and we await for a better time than this, thank you that you are with us, that you have promised us these things. Amen. Right.
Let's have some quick notices. I think 6:30 daily things are probably carrying on for this week. Probably on this channel, but possibly also on the new channel.
Whoa.
Watch out for St. Stephen's and St. Paul's Church, Newport. And what else is there notice-wise? We're about to go to Zoom.
That's the main thing.
If you're not sure if you got a link to this, check your email account and maybe check your spam, because it's possible that Churchly got filtered out to your spam, which would be very sad. If you haven't figured out how to get Zoom to work, you could try messaging someone who is on Facebook, maybe, or you could try texting me. My number is in that email, and we'll do our best to get anyone in who's not in. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us.